Welcome back to the Scotti-BYTE channel, and this is Scott. So today I want to talk about VLANs on LXD Dashboard. So I normally explain the features of LXD containers in the context of the command line, or the CLI. I have a tutorial entitled LXD Dashboard where I show the installation and configuration of LXD Dashboard. And if you haven't seen LXD Dashboard before, you might want to go look at it. And if you're not familiar with LXD containers, you might want to go back and look at my tutorial entitled LXD Containers 101. So LXD Dashboard is a powerful GUI allowing you to configure a multitude of LXD functions. I have multiple VLANs on my network, and in this video, I'm going to show how to configure a LXD container via the LXD Dashboard interface to communicate on more than one of your VLANs from a single container. Here we are in the main screen of my LXD Dashboard, and I'm going to come down to my desktop system named Mondo. Over here, I'm going to click on Containers, and then plus Container to create a new container. We'll go ahead and call this container Test, and we'll give it the description of Demo. And then on the image, I'll just say Ubuntu 2204 LTS, and then profile will be default, and we'll set auto start equal to true, and then we'll go ahead and set security nesting equal to true because we're going to add a Docker container into this particular container for this demonstration. So that goes ahead and creates the container. Now we're going to click on this container, go over to Profiles, and under Profiles, I'm going to add a profile. And in this particular case, I'm going to add my bridge profile to put this on my main LAN. So I submit that, and then I can start the container. And if we go over to Overview, you should see an IP address on my main LAN very shortly. And here we are with an IPv4 address of 172.16.1.113, which is on the main LAN, and an IPv6 address as well, since my main LAN has IPv6. If we go over to Interfaces, you can see that I have device ETH0 and the loopback device as expected. So if I go over to exec and I start an exec session, sometimes you'll get a message saying that you have a WebSocket connection error. If you go ahead and click on the address here, go to advanced and say proceed, what it does is it just goes ahead and opens the screen to verify that certificate. We do a dismiss, and now we're able to start that exec session. So over here, I'll do an apt update followed by ampersand apt upgrade -y, and we'll upgrade our container so that everything is up to date. Next, we'll add Docker to this container by running the Docker script from the Docker website. And then we'll add Docker Compose with an apt install docker-compose. Let's add a user account with an add user Scott. I give Scott a password. And then we're going to add Scott to the sudo group and add Scott to the Docker group. So usermod -a G sudo Scott and usermod -a G Docker Scott. I install net-tools with apt install net-tools. And finally, I can do an if config, and you can see that we have device ETH0 and the loopback device, as we could see from the GUI screen earlier. Now I can exit out of the exec screen, and when I do so, it stops exec. I could have just as well clicked on the stop exec button. Then I can move over to console. When I start the console, it will give me a username login. I can type my username Scott and type my password, and it will log me in over here. I can do a Docker PS, and it comes back, and of course we have no Docker containers. And I can do a groups, and you will see that I'm in the sudo group and also the Docker group. In our demonstration, we're going to install a Docker program called Watch Your LAN. So I'm going to do a make dir on WYL and a cd into WYL. Then I'm going to do a nano docker-compose.yml, and we'll paste in the contents of the Docker compose file for WYL. So Watch Your LAN is a very simple program that is going to go ahead and look at our interfaces. The interface name for inside of our container is ETH0. So I have ETH0 listed here. This uses a SQLite database, and I have the GUI port set up as port 80, and that's pretty much all there is to this particular application. So I do a Control-O and Enter to write the file out, and a Control-X to exit the nano editor. To launch Watch Your LAN, I simply do a docker-compose up-d. And did you know that you can also do a docker space compose for the newer interface for Docker Compose? And we'll do that so you can see what it looks like. So it's pulling the application containers, and it's finished. If we do a Docker PS, we can see our program up and running, and it's simply one image called Watch Your LAN, or WYL. At this point, we're done with the console, so we can go ahead and exit out of the console and then do a stop console. We go over to overview, and again, the address that this container has out on my LAN is 172.16.1.113. If I go over to a web tab and hit enter, you'll see that it logs into the application. After about 5 minutes, Watch Your LAN will propagate this home screen, and you'll see a whole series of addresses, and it won't list any names, but it lists the IP address and it lists the MAC address. So over here it says known in this right-hand column. If you scroll all the way down the screen, you'll see a section called log. So in this case, I know that 172.16.1.0.1 is my UDM Pro router. And if I go ahead and type that and then click on this known button, then it goes to the top of the screen and it labels it as UDM Pro. So what you can do is you can go down and label all of your systems appropriately. If I move further down the list, I know that 172.16.1.58 happens to be VMS Cloud, so I can type in VMS Cloud. And I know that 1.57 is VMS Fog. You can't do more than one of these at a time, and in fact, if you click on the No button for VMS Fog, it will scroll right to the top. And then if we scroll back to the bottom here, we can see that VMS Cloud was not defined. So we have to go back here again and type in VMS cloud. So you can only enter one of these at a time, and although that's a little laborious, if you're patient and you finish everything out, you'll have everything defined. So the IP address is clickable, and if you click on it, it will try to go out to a website offered by that particular IP address. In this case, there's nothing being offered at that address directly. And if you click on the MAC address, what it'll do is it'll go ahead and bring up this informational screen telling you a little bit more about this particular host. And you also have the option to delete that host if you don't want to track it. So for example, in this case, 172.16.0.2 is an alternate address for the UDM Pro, but I don't necessarily need it, so I'll click on it and go ahead and say delete host. And it comes back to the screen, and here we are. Over in the hardware column, it's kind of nice because it describes the hardware vendor, and in most cases, it's fairly correct. And you can scroll down through here and see a variety of descriptive information in those particular columns. Back on LXD Dashboard, we have under the interfaces section an interface for Docker 0, which is Docker's NAT network. We have ETH0, and we have the loopback connector. So we're going to go over to devices here and network. And we see again here ETH0 is a bridged adapter and the parent is bridge 0. So we're going to add a new network device, and this new network device will be named ETH1, and we'll be using a NIC type of MAC VLAN. We've got lots of other choices. We're not going to use bridged, we're going to use MAC VLAN. And then under here, we're going to say use parent device bridge 0. And as we go down the screen on additional properties, we're going to go ahead and type in VLAN 30, which is the VLAN number for my IoT network VLAN. Now I click on submit, and we see an ETH1 device, and rather than being bridged, it uses MAC VLAN, but its parent is still bridge 0, as described in my other videos on setting up LXD and creating a software switch, otherwise known as a bridge. So now that we have that, if we go over here to interfaces, you're going to notice that it will flag that we have ETH1 here shortly, but ETH1 is grayed out and it says that it is down. The reason for that is we're going to have to restart our network, and so we'll stop this container. We'll start this container back up, and if we watch carefully, we'll see that ETH1 is now up. However, although ETH0 gains an address, an IPv4 address automatically, ETH1 does not. So if we go back over to the exec console or the regular console, I'll just go to exec since it's easier to log into, and I have a root password or root session over here. If I cd over to /etc/netplan and I do an ls, you can see that there's a file called 50-cloud-init.yaml. So I'm not going to need sudo since I'm running as root, and I'll do a nano of 50-cloud-init.yaml. And here we are, and you can see that in this netplan file, it only defines ETH0. So we're going to space over under ETH0, and we're going to type in ETH1, and space over here. Do not use tabs because YAML files absolutely hate tabs. And we'll do a DHCP4, and we'll also set it equal to true. Now that we have that, if we do a Control O, hit enter to write the file out, and Control X to exit the editor, all we have to do is a net plan apply, and it applies the configuration. Now, if we go back to our interfaces screen, you can see that we have ETH0 and ETH1 here, neither of which have an address, and now they both have an address. Here's the 172.16.1.113 on my main LAN, and here's ETH1, which is MAC VLAN bridged over to my IoT network, and it's gotten an address from my router of 192.168.30.72, which is in fact on the IoT VLAN. Now if we go back over to Watch Your LAN, the screen repaints, and over here you can see that we have our standard network, our main LAN at 172.16. But if we scroll further down the screen, we should begin to see nodes on 192.168.30. And we're not seeing those yet. And just like when we first set up Watch Your LAN, it took about 5 minutes to be able to see the addresses from that network. So the same is true of waiting for the addresses for the VLAN 30. And of course, I've skipped an important step. We also have to go over to the config screen on Watch Your LAN, and we have to go ahead and type in ETH1 as well as one of the interfaces that it should watch. And you separate these by spaces. So I have ETH0 and I have ETH1, and I come down here and click on the Save button, and it saves those. And now I can go back to the home screen, and now it should wait a little while and then start displaying addresses on the 192.168.30 network. So while we're waiting for my IoT VLAN to show up, let's go over here to interfaces, remind ourselves that we have ETH0 and ETH1. Let's go over to devices again, click on network, and add yet another network device, and this one will be called ETH2. It will also have a NIC type. Rather than network, it will have a NIC type, and it will be MAC VLAN. And under parent, we will choose bridge 0 again, and under VLAN number, we're going to choose VLAN 80, which is my Cloud DMZ VLAN for my hosted applications. I click Submit, and it will be added in here as well. So let's go see if we can bring up this interface by going over to the exec screen and editing the YAML file with the nano 50-cloud-init.yaml. Going down here and spacing over to ETH2, hit enter and space over and put in DHCP4, space, true, and hit enter. A Control O, hit enter to write the file out, Control X to exit the editor, and a net plan apply. And then we go back over here to the interfaces screen, and we can see that it's not yet up and running because it says that the state is down. And there we go. It actually came online, and it does have an address of 192.168.80.60, which is an address on my Cloud DMZ VLAN. So if we go over to the browser tab for Watch Your LAN, you can now see that we have addresses showing up on our IoT VLAN at 192.168.30. We can go down through here and see all of the 30 addresses, followed by the main LAN addresses of 172.16. So now I want to go back to config. I want to go ahead and leave another space and add ETH2 in here as well, and click save at the bottom of the screen and wait another requisite 5 minutes. And now after a couple of minutes on the main Watch Your LAN screen, you can see that the 192.168.80 addresses for the DMZ Cloud VLAN are appearing at the top of the screen. If we scroll further down, we have the 192.168.30 addresses for the IoT network. And if we scroll down even more, we have some more addresses from the 30 network, and then finally some addresses for the main LAN at 172.16. So going back to LXD Dashboard, you can see that I have device ETH0, which is the default device inside of a LXD container. We've added ETH1 and ETH2. If I click on the interfaces screen, you can see that there is an adapter for Docker 0, Ethernet 1, Ethernet 2, and a loopback connector. And if we go back to the overview screen, you can see the addresses here for the Docker network, the main LAN address, the IoT address, and the Cloud DMZ address as well. And just to be able to see this a little bit more clearly, inside of the container, I'm doing an if config here, and you can see the Docker 0 network, the ETH0 addresses for IPv4 and IPv6, the ETH1 address, the ETH2 address, and the loopback connector. So this has been an example of creating more than one Ethernet adapter on the same LXD container, and then using Watch Your LAN to look at addresses across all of the container interfaces. So in summary, LXD Dashboard has many functions that make configuring LXD containers easier than the CLI. In this tutorial, we configured a Docker application named Watch Your LAN to illustrate how a single LXD container can communicate with multiple VLANs. LXD Dashboard can manage multiple LXD host systems and leverage the real power of LXD containers. Anyway, that's it for today. Please subscribe and like to the channel, and don't forget to hit that notification bell, and we'll see you next time.